It's only taken me 10 years to figure out that if I get here at 9:30, I have to wait for half an hour to get started. I'm a slow. She offers me food, but
always.
But this is like brunch.
Well, yeah. But yes, and it is for some folks. But we can just go ahead and get started. I think we can go ahead. Everybody's had enough to eat for now, because we still have more pancakes. I can give you pancakes to go, little bags. But we have more coffee too. So, but very glad to see all of you this morning. It's nice to be able to get together and not have snow on the ground, and spring is finally here. And really glad to be able to have Dan Tolman back with us, who has been patiently waiting for the pancakes all these years. So I finally said, "You can come
just
back
come
and
a little
breakfast."
later." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So here I am.
But so this is Dr. Dan Tolman, who's been with us before. And remind me, you're with Stewart now.
I work with a lot of people. So I'm independent employed. I'm self-employed. I have medical privileges at Lawrence General, Holy Family, and Anna Jake's. And our group works with Stewart and Beth Israel and also partners.
Yeah.
So we're very...
You get to see them in different places.
We're, because of the way that healthcare is going these days, a lot of these big companies have primary referral networks. Yeah. And a little company like mine, as long as we're everyone's first, second choice, we'll stay in business and happily. Exactly. So it's working for us for now.
Perfect. And next month will be, poor Gary has left the room, so we'll throw him right under the bus. It'll be Gary and Doug are going to talk with us about what's on the town meeting warrant, and some of the issues and concerns that are coming up in the town. So I appreciate that. I called right on my friends and said, "Would you mind?" It's kind of perfect timing. But they said yes. They're very gracious. So thank you so much. We'll turn it right to you. And so I know he'll have to blast out of here, but
I'll have to blast out at 10:30, but that's okay. We got half an hour.
Okay.
So I think I was looking at my keeping track of this. I think I've been doing this for like 12 years or so.
Well, what was startling to me was we were both at a presentation at Wingate on Alzheimer's research, and you had your son with you.
This was just this was a few months ago.
Yeah, and your son, who I remember,
is a little tiny.
Yeah, because he was very tall, and he was driving, and I was like, so that means how long? It's been at least 10 years.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
I think in the past we've talked about a variety of, and I also have to say hi to my office, because they joke about me later. So, hi office. So, here I am. I actually do come here, so they keep track of me. We've talked about lots of different things. Sometimes I come here with an agenda, or we have requests from the floor. This time I don't have anything really prepared. I'm happy to talk about anything you want. Disease processes, meds, anatomy, physiology. My nephew has this, my sister-in-law has this, my mom has this. Is this a bad thing for me? Should I go see the doctor? I haven't seen one in 5 or 50 years or whatever. What does that mean? What about what's going on in Russia with tuberculosis? What's bird flu? Why is it important? What about antibiotic resistance? Me, myself, who cares about antibiotics in chickens or whatever? I'm open to any discussions. I think, turn off my phone. In times past, I've had things to discuss, but I don't know. What do you guys have any burn hot? Oh, you're closer. He's closer. Closer's always better. Unless you have some money. I'll take money. Then I'll have to. No, go ahead.
What percentage of men, seniors, get prostate cancer?
If you live long enough, 100%.
Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
How is it treated, or how does it?
So I'm a family medicine doc, and I see patients mostly in the post-acute care, in the skilled nursing facilities and rehabs and things like that. So if you go to your primary care doctor and you tell them what I said to you, and this PCP says something else, go with the PCP, okay? But I've got good general knowledge and specific knowledge in what I do. But as far as prostate cancer, my understanding is that by the time everybody's about 94, you're 100%. You've got prostate cancer. You're going to have it for sure. So then the question is, does it matter? And I think that the common understanding is by the time you're 94, if you have no issues with your prostate and you've got prostate cancer, that is the least of your problems, and you're golden. I think modern prostate, I think modern prostate cancer is more managed with trying to figure out how fast it's going to grow. Because prostate cancer can metastasize to other places in your bones and lymph nodes and things like that. But frequently it's just a problem where it's locally obstructing your ability to go to the bathroom.
What causes it?
Cancers, so your body, the way that your body works is that you have some cells that live forever from the time you're born to the time you die. Those are mainly the nerve cells. But most cells have turnover, some very fast. Some cells live only a few days, and others for weeks and months and things. In order to make repetitive copies of cells in your body, your DNA in your nucleus makes RNA, which makes proteins and proteins and cells and organs and everything. And there are ways that your DNA and RNA edit themselves to take out damage or inaccurate copies, because you're copying these things millions and millions of times a day. And so if there's a miscopy or something happens wrong, it can get stuck into a protein or something that's making something that's wrong, or doesn't die. Because part of everything that we do, a lot of what the cancers are that we have, are cells that don't have the die switch on. Correct. So the switch that says, your skin is supposed to do. Your skin starts as little square cells, and then they get flatter and flatter and flatter, and then they're supposed to get just left over the firm part, the keratin, and the waterproof part gets out, and then as flakes off and it's gone. As long as that continues in an ordered way, that's fine. But if you have cells that don't die, then they keep dividing, and then you have a cancer. And that's what most cancers are cells that just don't have the off switch. So that's what cancer is. And your question was, what is prostate cancer, or why do we get it?
Why do we get it?
We get it because why cancer? I think that humans weren't really made to live more than 55 years or so.
Over that now.
Well, historically, it's important to have kids, procreate, and then to support your kids' kids. Once your kids' kids are ready to go, then you're done. Your purpose on Earth, as far as biology is concerned, is good. You've done what you're supposed to do. So
if you're saying you have more sex, you're less likely to get less.
That is true. If you have more sex, you're less likely to get prostate cancer. Wrong. So bang. So there you go. You've got my blessings. So yeah.
Now you're telling me.
Yeah. So yeah. So there's that. That's good news. So cancers are very varied. Some are metastatic. Metastatic cancers mean that they don't stick together well, and that they go and they float around and get stuck in different parts of your body. That's what metastatic means. Metastatic doesn't necessarily mean that it's harder to treat, because like brain cancers are usually not metastatic, but they're growing in your brain and they're hard to get to. So that's the problem with brain cancers, is that they're not necessarily metastatic, but they're hard to treat because they're right down there in the parts of the brain where you don't want to cut and do radiation and all that stuff. Although cancer treatment right now is really, really moving forward quickly, my understanding, and the ability of diagnosis for people. So let's say you have prostate cancer. Let's say 10 of us have prostate cancer, and they can characterize which cancer types we have, because different damaged parts of the DNA and RNA are creating different cancer types. So even prostate cancer is not just all prostate cancers. There are different types of prostate cancers. So you can apply different types of therapy to different kinds of cancers, and you can say, oh, this is a slow-growing cancer. We don't have to worry about that. Or this is a bad one. We got to cut that out because it's not going to be good. Or you can say, people with this kind of cancer usually live for 20 years. You're 60. We need to be aggressive with you. Or this, 20 years in this guy who's 83, let's not be aggressive with that person, because the side effect of cancer treatment, especially prostate, is a lot of times urinary incontinence and impotence. So those are a bummer. And so if you can avoid that and just, trundle along and say, well, all of my family members all seem to croak at 90 and I'm 83, and my prostate cancer is going to get me at 103, I'm going to ignore this cancer. That is a legitimate and fair discussion and entirely appropriate. So, that's why you go talk to urologists and your PCPs, because they keep track of all those things very closely. But that same thing can be applied to breast cancers or colon cancers or things like that. So not only monitoring and characterizing cancers is coming along, but treatment with antibodies, autoimmune things that they can create that attack the cancer specifically. Because the problem with cancer is that cancer is you. These are your cells. So if you have a regular old cell that is in your brain and it just doesn't die and it keeps growing, and then you've got 2 cells and then 4 cells and then 8 cells and then 16, like those cells aren't in and of themselves doing anything particularly bad. They're just growing. They're just being cells. They're taking glucose in and using oxygen and just like minding their own business. But they're in a place where they're not supposed to be, and they're slowly growing, and the cells around them are growing and dying and growing and dying. So this cancer that's in your brain, which is benign and not malignant, but it's in the wrong place and it's a cancer, that's going to cause you a problem. So then you've got these medications you have to take that are going to kill those cells, but you have to figure out what kills those cells faster than my other cells, because you've got other cells that are growing much faster. In fact, frequently the fastest growing cancers are the easiest to treat. And that's a lot with a lot of the pediatric cancers. Those are easier to treat because they're fast. It's like burning paper. It's fast, but if you can, it burns itself out pretty quickly. And a lot of these chemotherapeutic agents that stop cell turnover attack those cancers and destroy them pretty quickly. And the side effects are on cells that turn over quickly, like your gut cells turn over quickly and your hair cells. So that's why some people lose their hair when they get certain kinds of chemotherapy, or why people have diarrhea and things like that. That's my cancer story. Oh yes.
Is it true that radiation therapy in itself can cause cancer?
Yes. Yep. So you got to figure out. Yeah. Cancer is, it's just there's a lot of bad luck in it. There's genetics. There's exposure. Some people who live up in high altitudes get more radiation from the sun. Pilots are flying over, pilots and flight attendants are exposed to ionizing radiation more. There's if you work in mines or with asbestos, you cause irritation in your lungs and you're more predisposed to getting lung cancer. If you smoke or drink alcohol.
Are environmental factors more important than genetic factors for predisposition for cancer?
I think that environmental or genetic. I think that there are so many different kinds of cancers that you'd have to decide which one. So some colon cancers are so genetically determined that by the age of 30 or 25, people are supposed to start getting, I think it's familial polyposis. You're supposed to start getting annual colonoscopies at age 20 or something like that. It's remarkable. In fact, some people have such a degree of this risk for cancer that they will get parts of their colon taken out prophylactically as a young person, because you don't need your whole colon. As much as you can keep is good, but if there's a particular part that's at risk, like the sigmoid colon or whatever, sometimes you can get that taken out. However, other things are clearly not good for you. Smoking irritates your lungs. High degrees of alcohol or other toxins can irritate your liver. Certain infections like Hep C can increase your risk of liver cancer. It would be you'd have to see. And then the other thing about the environmental things is that it's hard to say environmentally what is a risk factor and what is not. I think that depends on your perspective on life and regulation and things, because a lot of times you'll have food additives or this or that where the risk of cancer may or may not be up a bit, and some people will say, I don't want any more risk of cancer, and others will say, well, it increases the shelf life and you can feed more people, or just leave me alone and I'll deal with my own risk. So I don't know, it's those kind of smaller risks that are something also.
Is it true that most...
Oh, wait, your turn. Yeah, that was your D. You had a question.
Okay, we're entering tick season again.
tick season?
So if you get bit by a tick,
Mm-hmm.
and you know it,
Yep.
tell us the steps we should take. You just can't assume that the tick is benign.
Yeah. I think that we are in the zone where Lyme disease is prevalent. That's an important thing to know because the treatment is different in different parts of the country. We are also in the area of the country where doctors are very attuned to Lyme disease. So to some degree, it's safer to get Lyme disease here than out in, like Wyoming or something. Because other places where you might get Lyme disease, you might go there multiple times and see your doctor over and over again, and they would not think Lyme disease. They'd think that you've got chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, or you're depressed or anxious or just a weird person or whatever. But here, everybody's going to be thinking Lyme disease, so that's good. If you know you got a tick bite and you have a round, what's it called? There's a term for the round patch that you get. Bomart. What?
Red.
It's a red
Yes. A bull's, yeah. And it doesn't actually have to be right where the bite is. It can be any place. So if you get bitten, here, and you get this thing here, that's the same thing. Because you will probably get the bite, right around the bite, you'll get a red circle just from the irritation of the bite itself. I think that the treatment is within a short period of time, I could look it up, but you can take one dose of, I think it's doxycycline, an antibiotic, or amoxicillin, or Augmentin, or a variety of different medications. You can take a one-time dose, and that decreases your risk by 75% or some large percent. I think that that's what most people would do. So that's one thing. If you have the tick itself, it's good to take it to the doctor's office, because here local PCPs frequently will know, they'll be able to differentiate between the ticks. Also, just having a tick on you and even biting you isn't enough, because it has to be on you for like 8 hours or something like that. It has to be either engorged or engorged. So if you have a little tiny Ioxides, I think that's the deer tick, whatever. If it's the right kind of tick and it's been on you and it's engorged, then yep, there you go. You should take doxycycline. You should take it off and take doxycycline. But there is treatment for Lyme disease. I think that there's a lot of I don't know what to call it, differing thoughts about chronic Lyme disease and treatment, because Lyme disease is very treatable with antibiotics. It's very treatable. But I think that there's something to people who get Lyme disease, and then after a while they have neurological signs and symptoms. They get treated, and despite optimal treatment and despite repetitive visits and even lumbar punctures where they check your cerebrospinal fluid and culture it and look for the RNA and things like that of this virus, you still have it, or bacteria.
What about the co-infection? Because ticks can carry more than one disease.
Yes, yeah, they can cause other, tick-borne infections. I can look those up. In fact, there's one that's interesting out that I'm just hearing about, just hearing about because I work too much and don't read enough. But there's this meat allergy that's happening in. Have you guys heard of this meat allergy? There's a new allergy that's popping up primarily in the southeastern part of the United States, carried by, it's a tick-borne virus, and it's an allergen to proteins from non-primate meat. So that means, non-primate meat means you could eat monkeys or humans, but you can't eat chickens, pork, cows, things like that. So these people are having major problems because one day you're fine, the next day you start getting allergic reactions to hamburgers and hot dogs. And it can be even things like gelatin. I'll bet that gelatin is in that sugar-free, like gelatin's in everything. Like even pills that you take, some of the capsules have gelatin in it. Just imagine, like, that's in a lot of stuff. And
So we're safe with the Mediterranean diet then?
Yeah, you could become a vegan. Of course, some people are very, very sensitive. Like they'll walk in and even just kind of touching and exposure to things like that. So that's a real bummer, the whole allergic thing. Thank God for allergists. I think that allergists are going to have more and more work to do over the years to come. So I could look up. I think one of the real benefits of medical school is that you spend a lot of time learning how to learn about medicine, and so what you do in medicine is largely determined by repetition. So if you're a primary care doctor and you're having a lot of tick questions, you can get really, really good at tick questions. For me, in the skilled nursing facilities, there are no ticks in the activity yard, and nobody's going outside enough to get a tick bite. So for me, it's been a while since I've had to deal with tick bites. I've had some family members get tick-borne infections and things. So I'm a little up to date, but not. I took my boards recently, and that was a toughie. Dealing with pregnancy and delivery and pediatric vaccinations and things. I'm like, I don't know, whatever. I guessed right. I guessed C on all of them. I passed, so that was good for me.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Yep.
Squamous cell cancer.
Mm-hmm.
I had Crohn's disease.
Mhm.
I've taken a maintenance drug for 30, 40 years of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to this squamous cell cancer, according to my doctor.
Squamous cell in the skin or in the colon?
As a theoprene I was taking as my maintenance drug,
Mm-hmm.
1 daily. And the effect of that was the sun's rays, because I work outside all the time,
Mm-hmm.
caused
Yeah.
my skin cancer.
Yeah. So squamous cell carcinoma, so there are basically 4 kinds of skin cancer. The one that's bad is melanoma.
Yeah.
So melanoma is the one that is the melanin, the dark cells that determine how tan you are, or these dark spots that I have and things like that, that's melanin. And so melanoma is the bad one, the tough one, the one where if you have it, they'll go in and they'll cut out your section. Melanoma is you don't freeze, you don't do a hole punch on it, they cut it out and they send it to pathology, or they do a pathology right there. They do Mohs surgery where they check it immediately, like you're sitting there waiting and the guy takes it back and they go check it like themselves under the microscope. Because it can be recurrent and it can be aggressive and it can kill you and it can metastasize. Squamous cell carcinoma and basal cell carcinoma aren't generally lethal at all. The only time I see them being lethal are people who just don't want to treat it at all. Generally they're in skilled nursing facilities, generally they'll have dementia, and they won't want to treat it. And those things are locally invasive, they can grow in. Like you could theoretically have it eat through your cheek or eat into your bone. I've seen it like eat through people's cheeks or eat like off half of their ear or things like that. That happens. But that's totally a strange occurrence. So squamous cell and basal cell carcinomas, you can basically freeze those off. Those are pretty benign. Actinic keratoses are the red, hard, rough spots that most men get on the top of their heads and on hands and things. Those can develop into squamous cell carcinomas. I think doctors love those because it's easy peasy, it's fun. You're doing something, it's good, you're doing good, and it's a visit, and you get to make some money, and it's good for everybody, except for Medicare. Not good for Medicare. Not good for those that don't have it. So, yeah, you can freeze those off, and you can freeze lots of those. You can also put medication on those, and like 5-fluorouracil. That's kind of a burning agent, a burning chemical agent, and it basically burns off these things.
I've stopped taking this medication on the advice of my doctor, and my Crohn's disease is fine, so I'm lucky in that sense. But I've just got another one come on my arm. I just wondering, should I leave it or should I get it? Because they cut them out, I've got skin grafts and things on my hands.
It's not invasive. It's not very invasive. It's not very aggressive. It's not metastatic. I think that you could probably just go see your doctor at your normal interval, like 3 months later or whatever is right. You don't have to like rush to the doctor or go to the urgent care center or any of that stuff for those things. So I don't know. It's all about your risk.
Two huge ones on the back of my hand. I thought they were warts.
Yeah.
But they weren't. And
Yeah.
they cut them right out.
Yeah.
Sent out for biopsy.
Yeah.
And they haven't come back. Now they said, well, we got to cut those out again because they haven't got everything. But there's nothing on my hand that feels fine. So I said, well, I'm going to wait until they come back up.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
They can freeze those off or whatever. The advantage of doing a biopsy and cutting something out is then you can send it to pathology,
Right.
and they can actually see what it is. Once you freeze something, you have no specimen, and also after you freeze it, you've damaged the skin afterwards, so you can't really. Future biopsies of that site are going to look funny anyway, so you're not going to be able
my
to.
head several times.
Yeah, absolutely. There's tons of sun exposure and all that up on the top of the head. That's
I
for
drive
sure.
home with my head out the window,
Yeah, for years I always thought that I was told that Windows blocked all UV light, and you were completely safe with Windows.
The new glass does, but, okay.
Well, it's interesting because I thought you couldn't get a sunburn, you can't get a tan through a window, whether it's a car or a home window. And I found out that modern cars have different UV protection in the front window and other, like there's different window protections depending on where it is. But largely it protects you a lot. So, but I was doing my research because there was contention in the car about how much window blockage. And I'm a son of a librarian, so I look everything up that I can. So.
Any new breakthroughs for Alzheimer's?
I just went to an Alzheimer's talk. Let's see what they said. He was saying that there are new medications. So Alzheimer's is a neurodegenerative problem where you've got proteins that are inappropriately being produced, and the nerve cells are damaged by these proteins. And so what they're trying to do is figure out how to get rid of these, how to not have these proteins inappropriately clumped together and have other proteins not be deposited on the axons of the nerves. I think that there are new things happening. I would suspect that in 10 years or so that there are some significant changes for Alzheimer's treatment. The current meds that I use mostly are primarily just to decrease behaviors, and it probably gets you 3 months to 6 months to 9 months of benefit, which is something, but I don't think that there's a lot, But 5 years, 10 years of an actual definitive treatment, that's remarkable. But it's still, 5 or 10 years in my book is 10 or 20 years.
So if you have dementia, what are your chances of getting Alzheimer's? Is there any correlation between?
Well, there are different kinds of dementia. You can have, dementia just means that you've got kind of disordered brain activity. You can have dementia from vascular dementia, meaning that you've got problems with circulation and you've had strokes or clots or things like that. Usually that's like small level damage, generalized small damage. You can have Alzheimer's dementia is only diagnosed in definitively in autopsy, if you prefer. Like after you're dead, they can say you had Alzheimer's. There are certain types of dementias that are more characteristic with different types of behaviors, and those have different characteristics as far as like whether it affects your frontal, like your personality really lives in your frontal lobe. That's what determines who you are, and it limits just doing whatever you want. People who have a stroke in their frontal lobe are disinhibited. They go around and they eat whatever they want and invest in whatever they want and say bad things to people and sexually inappropriate, all that stuff. So people who have frontal lobe dementia are the ones that are the meaner, crankier, like this isn't my grandfather, this isn't my dad. Other types of dementias affect other memory or hallucinations or visual abnormalities. Dementia is primarily memory, disorder of memory and behavior, but memory mostly, and usually it's recent memory. A lot of people with dementia can remember things from their 20s and 30s easily, but they can't remember their kids, which is a bad thing. Or they can't remember, recent activities or who their doctor is, or the fact that you saw them yesterday and talked to them for half an hour. So that's pretty standard dementia. So there are lots of different kinds of dementia. Yes, sir.
What about treatment with medical cannabis?
Medical cannabis. Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence. I don't know what I think that as I learn more and see how things kind of develop, I'll have more of an opinion on cannabis or not. I think that smoking in any way is not good for you. So I think that smoking cannabis, I'm less inclined to favor that. I think that my understanding is that cannabis is not particularly, it's not particularly physiologically addictive, but kind of morally and behaviorally it's kind of addictive. So it's kind of low level addiction, Like caffeine is is physiologically addictive. You know, you drink your coffee and then you stop and you get a headache. But like, if you go on vacation, you can't have coffee. You're like, oh, I got a headache. Or you'll drink tea or whatever. So it's not. That's like a physical addiction. Cocaine and heroin are extremely addictive physiologically. Cannabis. So the parts of the cannabis that I think are potentially interesting, my understanding, so I know that it increases appetite. We have medications that are cannabis derivatives that are appetite stimulants. I think that's great. I think that, and those aren't particular, those, some of them have some sedating ability, but they're not like addictive, and people aren't getting stoned on their pills to like increase their appetite. The ability of cannabis to decrease pain, that's interesting. That is very interesting. I don't know where that's going to go. I think that you also have to think about the cultural and societal damage that happens when you talk about gateway drugs. And when we're talking about gateway drugs, we should also talk about caffeine, nicotine, cigarettes, chew, those vape things, like all that stuff. Like, they're legal, and alcohol. You know, we as a society, we have to kind of come up with a negotiation between free will and the good of society. You know, and that's legitimate. That's a legitimate discussion that people can disagree on. We have ways of arguing about it. So I think that that's kind of where it's going to come down for me, is the benefit greater than the cost? And I don't know yet myself. So I'm not like hot and heavy for it or against it. I wouldn't. In fact, I don't even think I voted on the proposal. You know, like we had that thing like 2012. Yeah, I didn't even know myself as a doctor how I felt about that. So that's how kind of on conflicted I am. Gentlemen, I got to go. I can take one more or take off.
Yes, go. Stand there for one more minute.
Oh, I didn't even use this. This is the first time I've not used my dry erase thing.
Oh, darn it.
My paper erase thing.
I was all excited to use my new easel, or my new paper pad.
Yeah, I even brought my own pens. I always bring my own pens. People think it's definitely weird that I carry around my own dry erase pens. I get a lot of people who give me strange looks about that. That thing is not working. You're like the astronaut that went up into space and he's like,
well, Julie
Mike.
She just ran into the kitchen and said, you forgot to use the camera.
I heard a story on NPR about an astronaut who went to space and he was going to take a picture with his personal camera of the world, and he turned it on and he had forgotten to bring the little card, the USB card. Houston, what does it mean when you no USB card connected? Like, well, I think that's the problem, or whatever those little micro SD things are. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So yeah, anytime. What topic is? Because I have a good memory. I don't have dementia yet. If we have anything we want to talk about next year that are interesting topics, you can either think about in a couple months. I'll come back periodically. Yeah, I can come back. Any topics that strike your fancy, or you've got family members who are sick. We've talked about how to talk to your doctor before. We've talked about the ins and outs of primary care to the hospital to post-acute care. What's a nursing home, what's a rehab, what's an LTAC, those type of things. What's VNA? I am a hospice medical director, a VNA medical director. What's the difference between hospice and palliative care? We can talk about that.
It's always good to read. We can always go back.
We can go back and talk about my diabetes meds,
our good changes.
my Coumadin, my cousin's irregular heartbeat, or somebody had a stroke or a heart attack. What does that mean? Or how much exercise can I do? Are these palpitations weird? What's all that stuff? So you can think about those things, and if you let her know topics, she can email me and I can keep track of them, because I actually do keep track of these. So I'm happy to come back and talk about it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Glad you guys had. Yep.